MicroJig's MatchFit Grid Router Guide is all you need to mill our 4-inch dovetail grid with no measuring, no marking, no straight edges. The router guide simply self-indexes, with each groove guiding the next one. We supply the base and router bits. All you need is a router, equipped with a Porter cable style bushing adapter. Cut the relief grooves end to end and side to side, each one guiding from the last. Switch to the dovetail bit and reverse the steps, the relief grooves still guiding the cuts. You can make any size grid from 8 inches on up. If you can reach it, you can cut it. The router guide is universal, accepting virtually any router from 1 to 3 horsepower with bases up to 7 inches in diameter. From jigs and sleds to clamping tables of virtually any size, anyone with a router can now take full advantage of our MatchFit Dovetail system. Ask for the MatchFit Dovetail Router Guide at your local MicroJig retailer, online, or at microjig.com. MicroJig's MatchFit Pop Stops provide the functions of a flip stop with less hassle and at a fraction of the cost. They can be positioned nearly anywhere within your MatchFit half-inch wide 14-degree dovetail grooves and locked in place with the included screwdriver. The stop flexes into the groove when you place stock over it. No need to move the pop stop or flip anything out of the way. As the part is moved, the stop pops up out of the groove, ready to position your stock where you set it. Pop stops are economical, so you can set them anywhere needed for all the common cuts you make. Pop stops don't rely on gravity, so they can be used on sled bases and tabletops like no flip stop can. They can even be used for presetting angles on your jigs and sleds. Use MatchFit pop stops on your table saw, drill press, and miter saw. Anywhere you have a dovetail groove, you can set a pop stop. Ask for them at your local MicroJig retailer, find them online, or at microjig.com. You asked for it, and MicroJig comes through with the new MatchFit Ratchet Clamp. It features the same half-inch, 14-degree dovetail head as our other clamps, but with a fast-acting ratchet mechanism. When released, other ratchet clamps are subject to gravity. Our ratchet clamp features MicroJig's exclusive AP spring that holds the arm where you set it. These ratchet clamps are easy to use. Press the trigger to release the lever, slide the head of the clamp to engage the work, and pull the lever to tighten. Each click of the ratchet tightens the hold, and pressing the trigger instantly releases the clamp. The positive lock of the ratchet means that these clamps won't vibrate loose, even when routing, sanding, or grinding. The fast-acting ratchet, along with our AP spring, means you can clamp and reposition your work faster than ever. Look for the MatchFit Dovetail Ratchet Clamp at your favorite retailer or on our website at microjig.com. MicroJig's MatchFit Ratchet Clamp combines the fast action you want with our exclusive AP spring that keeps the clamp always ready for use. It features the same half-inch, 14-degree dovetail head as our other clamps, but with a fast-acting ratchet mechanism. And these great features make this clamp a true upgrade for your track saw. Make your cut and reposition your rail quickly and efficiently every time. The head of the clamp is forged to work in our MatchFit dovetail grooves and in the standard 12 by 8 millimeter track saw opening, making it compatible with virtually all track saw guide rails. Find out more by visiting your favorite woodworking retailer or online at microjig.com. Whatever it is you're working on, MicroJig's grip clamps are the fast and easy way to keep your DIY projects under control. It's a true MatchFit dovetail clamp that'll work in the half-inch 14-degree grooves that you cut, and is completely compatible with any MatchFit system you've already built. It just takes a quick squeeze or two to apply up to 150 pounds of clamping pressure wherever you need it. And the quick release lever on the handle makes it just as easy to release and move the clamp to the next project. You can use these convenient clamps anywhere you can cut the MatchFit Dovetail groove, so you can get all your DIY projects done wherever you need. They're sold in pairs to get you started right away. So ask for Microjig's MatchFit Grip Clamps at your favorite retailer, online, or at microjig.com. Latest one that we brought out this year is our CNC Workholding Kit. This workholding system has side clamping and top clamping capabilities, and it's going to cover most of what you need. You get 3 of our edge guides. This is a stop that's going to basically span 2 grooves, and you get 3 of them in the kit. So I'm going to have 2 on the long edge and 1 on the short edge, and that's going to make a square here, or a corner, that will allow me to locate my parts. We're going to put a reference groove all the way around the edge. When this is locked down, that reference edge will always be a known point, and so you'll get more accurate machining. So your part is going to butt up against the stop here, and notice how low profile it is. So we've got a profile here that's quite low. We can get down pretty close to the edge there without too many problems. And then we include a couple of other types of hold downs. So again, you get 3 of those. Our ring clamp is the next hold down. This is a cam clamp, basically. And what it does is it allows me to come in here, I can lock it in place, and it's a cam clamp. I can turn it to tighten, turn it to loosen. And the beauty part is that when I'm working with it, the center hub does not move. So there's no chance of loosening up that knob by accident. So that gives me the ability to really get my, my stock in. So I'm going to put my stock in place. I'd be butted up against a secondary corner here. I'm going to set that where I want it, and then just give it a little twist, and now it's stuck. Very quick and easy, no tools needed. We also have what we call the ramp clamp, but a machinist would know this as a toe clamp. It holds the parts from the edge, but the difference is with the ramp clamp, it's 2 pieces. So I'm going to lock it in place, and then as I turn this knob, it's going to drive that secondary part down and forward, allowing me to clamp my part. But it's also pushing down and forward, so it's going to help keep that tight to the table. Again, it's got that clearance around the edge, so you can run your bit around if you need to. It's a little bit less quick than the ring clamp, but if your parts that you're working with are slightly different sizes, this one can accommodate parts of different thicknesses and still clamp them in. So it gives you that ability. And the other option it has is there's a notch on the front of the pusher part that can go into the corner of your piece and hold it from that edge as well. So it's a very versatile piece. So the kit comes with 3 of the edge guides, 2 of the ramp clamps, and 2 of the ring clamps as well. So you've got plenty of options for holding your parts from the side. If you're going to do a different kind of milling though, let's say cutting into the stock where it requires a little bit more strength, we can use the overhead clamps that come with the kit, which are called the U-pad. The U-pad comes in, and it grabs onto the top, and then there's a stepped riser block that keeps it at the right angle. Now note that with the U-pad, there's a notch underneath. We're holding the part from the top, and we're pushing it down, so it's holding the part with friction. But it also has that notch, so it's physically restraining the part on the edge. If I put 4 of these around a piece, it's not going anywhere. It can't go anywhere. The U-pad keeps it tight on the top, but it's also holding it from the sides. Now here, I can combine them. I'm holding it against this edge. I could put another U-pad here and another one there. When I cut this piece, this football shape, I had 1 in each corner. This set comes with 4 of these, 3 of the edge guides, as I said, 2 ring clamps, and 2 ramp clamps. So there's 11 different components inside. And as a bonus, we also give you nylon hardware. So when you go to screw your spoil board down onto your machine bed, we give you nylon hardware with flat nuts so that you can tie it down, lock it in place with nylon, and if you happen to run your bit across it by accident, you're not going to damage anything. All of these components are going to be available individually for those of you who don't have a CNC, but you want to use them with your MatchFit clamping system. You know, whatever kind of dovetail table or sleds you may have designed. So for example, a couple of these stops here up in the corner, and I can take a hand plane and be working across, and it's going to go over the top of those stops without hitting them. And if it does happen to come over and scratch across the plastic, the hardware, the steel part is under the plastic. I can belt sand and sand against this, because again, I can hold these parts from the edges and work the whole top without the clamp being on the part. Those of you who have a slab flattening jig, the manual type where you run the router back and forth and forward and back on your part, this system is a great way to hold those parts down. You can hold the parts, run your router over the top of the whole thing, and you don't have a lot of fussing around. Just put a dovetail board underneath it, go to town. And one of the things I do want to show you that I like to use it for, the ring clamp especially, I can put it into my 360 sled here, and I can take apart. Let's say I want to just cut a bunch of small pieces. I'll put a stop here. I can bring this in. I can set my part where I want it, clamp that down, turn the knob, cut it off, unlock, move it, lock it, cut it, unlock, move it. I can do that all day long, and everything's right there where I need it to be, and it's all by hand, and it's all very quick. This is a great addition to the whole MatchFit line. So again, you can buy the whole kit, and we have the Breakout kits where you can buy the individual components. 2 of the ring clamps will be in one box, 2 of the ramp clamps will be in one box, 2 of the U-pads will be in one box, and 2 of the edge guides will be in one box. So all of the components will be available individually, a la carte, or in the kit. No more tape, glue, screws, or nails on your machine with Microjig's CNC Workholding Kit. This system, powered by MatchFit, updates machine shop clamping strategies to work with your benchtop CNC. Whether you need clear space to mill the top of your stock or a completely secure hold for heavy-duty milling, our system will meet virtually all of your needs for work holding. We provide nylon hardware and full instructions for making a MatchFit spoil board custom sized for your machine. The spoil board protects your machine from damage while supporting the fixtures that hold your work. 3 edge guides locate stock of any size to a known start point, and their low-profile design keeps them out of the workspace. A pair of ring clamps can be positioned wherever needed with a center hub that stays fixed when in use, so parts can be secured and released with just a twist of the wrist. 2 ramp clamps press down and forward on corners, edges, or curves to hold stock from the side for a clear milling path. 4 overhead U-pads are included, which can be used for thin stock or parts up to 1.1 inch thick when used with their stepped riser blocks. These provide the maximum hold that you need when you're working with heavy cutters. Now all of these parts are built around our MatchFit Dovetail hardware, which means that they can be used on all of your MatchFit tables, work surfaces, jigs, and fixtures. Ask for the MatchFit CNC Workholding Kit at your favorite retailer, online, or of course at microjig.com.
Can you spot the difference between this clamp and this clamp? They're both track clamps, but with one huge difference. This one relies on expensive aluminum track. With this one, you create your own track. MatchFit dovetail clamps are unlike any other track clamp. Its head is forged into a 14-degree half-inch dovetail profile, allowing you to create your own tracks with one of the most common router bits on the market. Without tracks, you're limited to the edge of your workbench and the clamp's throat depth. MatchFit dovetail clamps give you the freedom to clamp beyond the edge. They slide through the dovetail grooves below the surface to secure material without getting in the way. Make auxiliary fences, sleds, stops, hold downs, assembly tables. You can even transform your tool chest or existing workbench into a versatile clamping surface, easily and without expensive aluminum tracks. Sure, there are other track clamps out there, but who wants to buy all that metal? Whether for a quick jig or a permanent shop fixture, dovetail clamps will bring your woodworking to the next level. Cut a straight edge on warped or live edge stock with a sled, cut tapers, or assemble your projects on a perfectly flat surface. Your shop is good, now make it great. Add them to your cart and start working smarter today with the MatchFit Dovetail Clamps. Introducing the MatchFit Dovetail Clamp Pro, an all-in-one package that'll revolutionize the way you work with wood. It includes 2 dovetail clamps, a setup gauge, the all-new Dovetail hardware variety pack, and the specially designed MatchFit Dovetail router bit with built-in roundovers for cleaner cuts and less sanding. Everything you need to create your own tracks and make every inch of your shop more functional. Use the setup gauge to quickly dial in the Dovetail router bit's cutting depth and route grooves to experience the full range of functionality and versatility of the Dovetail clamps and Dovetail hardware. They move through the grooves below the surface, allowing you to secure material anywhere you can route a groove. The MatchFit system gives you all the functionality of T-Track and T-Track accessories at a fraction of the cost. Whether you need a quick one-time use jig or a permanent shop fixture, the Dovetail Clamp Pro makes it easy. Join the thousands of woodworkers who are already working smarter with the MatchFit system. Say hello to the MatchFit Dovetail router bit, specifically designed for our MatchFit Dovetail clamps. Its unique design uses the same standard Dovetail profile, but with a few tweaks. Its rounded corners cut incredibly clean dovetail grooves that require less sanding, making the MatchFit system faster and easier than ever before. The 1/32 inch roundover strengthens that bottom corner by removing less material. The 1/16 inch roundover at the top of the dovetail groove prevents tear out and fuzz, which means less time sanding and more time building. The router collet safety line shows how deep into the collet the bit should be. That means more surface area for the collet to grip, reducing vibration for a smoother cut, and minimizing the risk of the bit loosening and ejecting from the router. The laser cut depth guideline is exactly 3/8 of an inch from the end of the carbide cutter, allowing you to dial in your cutting depth fast. If you're a fan of the MatchFit Dovetail clamps, you're gonna love this bit. Experience the MatchFit Dovetail system in a whole new way. Introducing the Dovetail Clamp AP, the next generation of MatchFit Dovetail clamps. With anti-pivot technology and the all-new X-Pad, giving you hold down and inline pressure at the same time. What? We already broke the mold with the first generation of Dovetail clamps by creating a work-holding system with just a router bit. Now you can apply clamping pressure in 2 directions with just 1 clamp and no expensive T-Track. The included X-Pad slips right over the standard cap, applying downward and horizontal pressure simultaneously. Combined with stops, you can glue up long parts without long clamps. Just this little guy. It's like 2 clamps in 1. Crazy, right? You can use it to make a tall fence on your table saw. Or a straight line jig. Use it on the drill press to secure fences, stops, or material, or you can use it on the miter station. Use a spacer to secure material from a distance, leaving the top unobstructed for flattening, template routing, or CNC work. Want to clamp round stock? No problem. The Dovetail Clamp AP's coil spring keeps the arm of the clamp in place, defying gravity. When you're setting up a large glue-up or swapping out parts for repetitive processes, the arm won't drop down and get in your way. The Dovetail Clamp AP is also longer than the original, giving you a full 8.5 inches of clamping capacity for larger projects. No other system gives you the flexibility to create your own tracks where and when you need them. For jigs, fixtures, and assembly, there really is no substitute. Join the thousands of craftsmen who are already working smarter with the MatchFit system and never buy another inch of T-track. MatchFit Dovetail clamps are backed by our extended 3-year warranty and 100% satisfaction guarantee. Add to cart and start working smarter today with the MatchFit Dovetail Clamp AP.
The MatchFit AP Dovetail clamps from Microjig are the right tool to choose for production clamping. But while the bar is longer and it comes with the X-Pad, it's the anti-pivot spring that makes this clamp so useful. The spring keeps the arm set where you place it, so it doesn't fall down on its own while you're working with the clamp. In a practical sense, this means you can mill your parts, undo the clamps, swap out the parts, and clamp the next set of parts in place without the arms falling down and needing to be reset with every movement. These are the most versatile track clamps on the market. Microjig's MatchFit system allows you to add clamps and hardware anywhere you can cut a dovetail groove without the need to buy extrusions. The system works in a 1/2 inch 14-degree dovetail groove that you cut and comes in several sizes and types. Track nuts that come with screws and washers, 1-inch track screws with shoulder washers and round knobs, plus 1.5 and even 2-inch track screws that come with wing knobs. Each type of hardware comes in packages of 6, and there is a variety pack that includes 2 of each component. MatchFit Dovetail hardware components from Microjig provide a versatile, easy-to-use system for creating whatever sorts of fixtures you need for your shop. Add MatchFit Dovetail hardware to your cart today, and you'll see why we say 1,000 jigs in every box.
The set includes 1 dovetail clamp, 1 dado stop, and 1 setup gauge, all designed to work together, giving you surgical precision with incredible ease. Use the setup gauge to lock in the exact curve of your specific blade, allowing you to set up and cut flawless dados in a fraction of the time. The dado stop takes the guesswork out of cutting dados. By registering off the actual material you're using, you no longer need to measure, cut test pieces, or move your fence. Its unique design allows the dovetail clamp to stay out of the way, making it simple to use and safe to operate. The Dado Stop Pro has everything you need to take your craft to the next level, make your shop more functional, and your work safer.
The best jigs and sleds need a great handle, but they've not always been easy to find, until now. You want a handle you can wrap your hand around, strong enough to effectively control your sled, and offering versatile mounting options. And we've got just what you're looking for. Our handles are about 1 inch thick and measure 5 inches between mounting holes, so hands of all sizes can get a grip. The handles come with a pair of MatchFit track nuts, screws, and washers, so you can mount a handle anywhere you mill a dovetail groove. Just slide the track nuts in and lock your handle in place. The handles can also be mounted using machine screws up to 1/4 inch in diameter, attaching them using standard nuts, threaded inserts, or T-nuts. Or they can be simply secured with a couple of wood screws. This is especially useful if you just need a backer for a quick cut at the table saw or router table. Whatever it is that you need to keep a grip on, Microjig's handles are among the best available to to keep you safely and comfortably in control of your jigs and sleds.
There's a reason why thousands of people have made my basic mobile workbench for their workshops and why it's the very first project in my weekend woodworker course. A workbench is the most essential part of a woodworking shop. One of the most common purposes for a workbench is to hold wood in place while you work on it. Woodworkers use a variety of clamps all the time for all kinds of purposes in the shop, and while the basic mobile workbench is good for clamping some things to, it poses limitations in a lot of situations because you can only clamp right to the edge. If I need to clamp something in the middle, there's no clamp that I have that has that long of a reach. And of course, there's no easy way to hold something vertically. So that's why I made this workbench topper. And why I'm excited to tell you about MicroJig's MatchFit grip clamps, and the MatchFit system to supercharge your workbench by giving you total clamping freedom and versatility beyond the edge of your workbench. The way this system works is you use a Dovetail router bit to route out these grooves however you like. Then you use these special MicroJig dovetail clamps that slide in this way. I recommend spacing these 4 inches apart for maximum versatility. This one is my favorite. This is the MicroJig grip clamp, and it will just slide in any of these, and then it has a trigger to tighten it down. To release it, you just pull that and slide it up. Then there's this cool Dovetail ratchet clamp, and this one is especially good if you're making jigs for your table saw or router table or whatever. So it'll just slide in like that, drop down, and then clamps down that way. And of course, this topper makes vertical clamping a breeze. So let me show you how to make the MatchFit workbench topper and show you a few things that you can do with it. The standard BMW is 4 feet wide by 2 feet deep. So I cut this sheet of 3/4 inch plywood to 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep. Then after drawing out a grid, I clamped it down to my workbench using the grip clamps. Sure, you can use them as regular clamps. Before you route out the dovetail slots, I recommend cutting relief grooves using a 1/4 inch straight bit in your router to remove most of the material. I'm actually going to be using this MicroJig 2-step bit for this part because I'm also going to be using it for something later. Now I can go back and make a second pass using a 14-degree dovetail bit. And of course the MicroJig dovetail bit comes in 1/2 inch shank or 1/4 inch shank. I'm using the 1/4 inch because that's the router I have. And I'll slice this into 2 pieces. Now I just need to attach this big piece to that piece. I think the way to do this is to flip this around like this. And then this one can go here. I'll join these together by gluing and screwing it together. I'll have to use these plain old boring clamps to hold it together while I drive the screws. I want an easy way to attach this to my workbench whenever I want to use it. So that's where this 2-step router bit is going to come in handy again. First I'll clamp this in place. Next I'll drill a pilot hole through the topper and through the top of the bench. I'll put 1 in each corner. Now what I can do is use this router bit in my drill to bore out the 1/4 inch hole and make a counter bore so that the top of the screw will be below the surface. And that creates this really clean hole with a nice rounded over edge. Whenever I want to use this topper, I can just drop it down like this. Then I'll take a washer and drop it in the hole along with a screw that goes all the way through both pieces. And what I'm going to do is take advantage of this MicroJig dovetail track hardware. It comes with all these different fixtures that go in these slots for making jigs, and what I'm going to use are these little turn knobs. Naturally, you're going to come up with a million different ways you could use this thing, but I want to show you a few ideas I have that are going to make common tasks in my shop more efficient. First of all, a big part of my style of woodworking is pocket hole joinery. Let me show you how I can use it for that. I'll use the grip clamps to hold my pocket hole jig in place. In order for pocket holes to work, you need to clamp the two pieces together while you drive the screws. So I can use this grip clamp for that. I like that it's a one-handed operation on this. So then, once I get these two pieces together, I can release the trigger and just slowly make sure that this is flush. Clamp it down. Then I can clamp down this piece. Now let's say you want to route an edge profile, say a round over to a board. You can't clamp it to the edge of a workbench, or you could, but you'd have to stop when you get to the point where the clamp is, undo it, clamp it down, and finish off the other side. With the MatchFit system, what I can do is clamp down a board over here, and then I'll clamp one on this side. But what I'm going to do is take this out, and I'm going to angle it in just a little bit, creating kind of a wedge shape. Now what I can do is just tap this in so I've got a secure hold. Sometimes I like to cover the edges of plywood with iron-on edge banding. The vertical section is perfect for that. Finally, I want to show you this great setup for gluing up panels. So what I've got here are two of these boards with some packing tape on them to prevent the glue from sticking to it. So this is going to elevate my panel up above these two pipe clamps. So once I've got these edges glued up, I can put them together. So what happens is when you're gluing up panels like this, sometimes they slip apart this way. So you need some sort of downward pressure, which is why I use these clamping cauls. I've had these for years. Again, these have the packing tape on one side so the glue doesn't stick. So I can put these here, and this will help flatten it out. Now I can use these clamps to apply pressure. This is way easier than the way I've always been doing it, which is by trying to slide clamps underneath these cauls. So I can tighten this down just loosely for now, not really tight. And then I can just continue tightening these clamps just a little bit. And again, flatten these out. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this video and this project. You know, I've been working with MicroJig for 13 years now, and it's always exciting for me to see what they're gonna come up with next. There's really no limit to what you can do with the MicroJig MatchFit system. I just love the versatility of it, especially with all of the different types of dovetail clamps. I especially like the one-handed operation of the grip clamp. And honestly, there's something really satisfying about that ratchet clamp. Anyway, that's all I got for now. You can learn more over at microjig.com. Thanks for watching.
Well, today we're going to make this handy mortising jig. It's perfect for making slip or loose mortise and tenon joinery. Now, if you're not familiar, loose or slip mortise and tenons just mean that you put a mortise in both of your work pieces and then you cut your tenon stock separately. And the word loose is not my favorite descriptor there because it's not really a loose joint. It's actually a very good, tight-fitting joint if made properly, but it's just one of the terms that we use. So this jig is incredibly useful, not just for simple 90-degree joints like in a door frame, but also angled joints, twin mortises, and mortises in odd-shaped components. This entire thing is made from just a portion of a single sheet of 3/4 inch plywood, and at the heart of it is MicroJig's MatchFit system and the MatchFit ratcheting clamps. The top adjusts in and out for varying material thickness, and it locks down using MicroJig Dovetail track screws. The vertical clamping plate features a series of dovetail slots that can accommodate shop-made fences, as well as all various clamps in the MicroJig MatchFit line. So you'll be able to hold just about anything, anywhere, and put a hole in it. Now, to make use of this jig, you will need a plunge router outfitted with a 5/8 of an inch guide bushing. You could then use any bit that you want that's a 1/2 inch or under to make your mortises. And perhaps best of all, you can download our free plan if you'd like to make your own. All right, let's dive into the construction. Even though Baltic birch still costs $1 million a sheet, I went with it for this jig since it's really hard to beat when it comes to stability and flatness. But any stable plywood or sheet good can get the job done. The cut list will lay out the various part dimensions, so you can just cut them to size using your circular saw, track saw, table saw, or whatever you have on hand. One of the many cool things about the MicroJig Ratchet AP clamps is that they engage perfectly with most track systems. I usually cut my parts slightly oversized with the track saw and then make the final cuts at the table saw for the sake of consistency, especially when we have so many parts that share dimensions. I could then use the miter saw to cut the narrower parts to length. Anytime I work with plywood, I'm careful to knock down the sharp edges just to avoid potential splintering. First up, we're going to cut some dados in the underside of our top, right here, and then also in our subtop, which will then accept runners. These are going to allow the top to move forward and back in a nice clean and smooth motion. The dados are in the same location on both pieces, and the same depth, so we can make all 4 cuts with the same exact setup. For the runners, I'll use some 1/4 sawn white oak and sneak up on the fit with the planer. I'm not really going for super snug here, as the pieces should easily slide without actually being loose. We'll glue the runners to the subtop later. Next up, we're going to cut the 2 dovetail slots in our subtop that'll accept the hardware, which will allow us to lock this top in position wherever we need it to be. The first step is to rough out a groove using a router bit or a dado blade. Mine is about a 1/4 inch wide, and I use the MicroJig setup gauge to establish the correct height. So the whole point of this first step is to clear the waste so that our dovetail bit doesn't have to do as much work for the second step. It saves wear and tear on the bit, makes the cut easier, and the results are better. By the way, the process here will be the same anytime that we have to make these dovetail slots. The MicroJig setup guide is pretty cool because it actually has multiple uses. We already used the square one for the first cut. The dovetail shaped one is just a little bit higher, and that's for setting the height of the dovetail bit. MicroJig's dovetail bit also has a laser line that you can use to set the height if you don't have the setup gauge. You'll also notice a line on the shaft that helps make sure that the bit doesn't go too deep into the collet. MicroJig's dovetail bit has a lot more going on than a regular dovetail bit. They put a lot of thought into the cut profile, but the most important thing that I'll point out is how they have a slightly rounded profile at the top. The result is a tear-out-free, smooth dovetail groove, which makes life a whole lot easier after the cut. With the height set and the fence set, I can make the 2 cuts. Now to prevent the piece from twisting, I back it up with a piece of scrap. And you can see the hardware engages with the slot perfectly. Next, we need a couple of holes in the top for the hardware bolts to go through. The holes should be just a bit larger than the bolt diameter, though the exact number isn't critical. In fact, mine are just a little bit more snug than they should be. Just a quick test run as a proof of concept. The only purpose of these guys is to slide back and forth when loose, and to stop the top from moving when tightened. Okay, so now we can glue those runners into the subtop. Glue and clamping pressure is about all we need, and be sure to clean up any squeeze out since that'll definitely affect the ability of the top to slide. At this point, you really want to evaluate the sliding action of the top. If anything, it's likely to be a bit too tight, and you could just sand or scrape the sides of the runners to make room. Just keep in mind that nothing is really sanded at this point, and the parts will be waxed later, which will definitely impact the action of the top, so maybe don't get nuts just yet. Ooh, I think it's time for an Oreo break.
He's a good boy. He's a good boy. He's such a good boy.
So next up, we need to make a slot. We have to have a slot here for our guide bushing, and it's a 5/8 guide bushing, and that will allow it to ride back and forth when the guide bushing is in our router. So the bit that I have here is a 1/2" bit. That's a little bit smaller than 5/8. I just don't have a 5/8 bit. Chances are you probably don't either. So we're gonna have to do this in 2 passes, but you really need to be careful and systematic about this and how we approach this bit. So the first pass is going to be on this side. So I've set my fence up so that my pencil line is right in line with the wing of the bit. So pass number 1 will clear out this front section, and we'll have a little bit left over here. So with pass number 2, we'll be able to go to our second line with the material being cut away at the front of the bit. What we're trying to avoid is cutting away material at the back of the bit, because then when we're running it in our right to left fashion, you can create a little missile if you're cleaning off material from the back side of this bit. So we're going to approach it first pass here, second pass here, keeping the material in front of the bit. And of course, we're going to have to do this in multiple passes, working our way up through this piece of plywood. Now I know it's tricky to see, but I do have pencil marks on here locating where my slot's going to be, my start and my stop point for the slot, as well as my center line. And I bring the start and stop points over to the edge. The reason I do this is as I'm making this cut, it's kind of blind. I can't really see what's happening with the bit. So I need to know where my start and my stop points are. So let me show you how we're gonna figure that out. Using a very large square or a piece of scrap, something that's gonna be big enough that the pencil lines can go outside the workpiece so we could still see them. I'm basically going to take my bit very carefully, rotate it so that my wings are going left to right. Basically, I want them to be as far as they're going to cut. So I could take my square, ride along the fence. When it hits the router bit, I can come out here. Whoops, that doesn't help if it's tilted. I'll come out here and draw a line. Now I have a black laminate here. With the proper lighting, you can see that pencil line very easily in your shop. I don't know if you guys can see it from the vantage point of the camera. Okay, I'll come on this side and now draw that line. And now when I'm actually making these cuts, I should be able to see right here how the pencil lines on the workpiece relate to the location of the bit. So for instance, if we were starting the cut, we would start here, so the bit is within that area, go all the way across. Here comes my stop point, and I stop on that other line. Drop cuts can be a little scary at first, but the key is to make sure the piece is held firmly against the fence as you slowly drop it down. It's also important that we don't take too much of a bite at once. And I should also mention that I highly recommend you only do this operation with a spiral bit, as those are much better suited to a plunge cut than a bit with straight cutters. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing wrong here. The bit is cutting up here and my pencil lines are down there. Obviously I got turned around and I'm just about to notice it. Thankfully that's just a cosmetic flaw, so nothing to do but laugh and move on. Now something that didn't occur to me at the time, but you might consider, is only cutting about halfway through the thickness. Then you could flip the piece over and finish the cut from the other side. This prevents the bit from having to protrude so much from the table. Once we punch through, I can adjust the fence to make the second cut. Now this one is conservative because I really want to sneak up on the perfect fit. Each time I nudge the fence slightly, and then test the fit with the guide bushing. I want the bushing to slide back and forth with a little bit of effort, but we definitely don't want it to be loose. Now we need to cut this shallow groove that'll accept our metal stop material. I'm using 1/8 inch thick by 1/2 inch steel stock, but you can use aluminum, plastic, or wood, whatever you want. I want the groove to be centered on the slot that we just cut, so I mark it out and head back to the router table. I'll use the same 1/2 inch bit that we used before to make the grooves. The stop strips should slide easily back and forth, and they should be flush or just a bit recessed. We need a hole in the strips for the Dovetail hardware, about an inch from the end. By the way, the MatchFit clamps also engage perfectly with the slots on my drill press. Notice that my bit drifted slightly when I did the drilling and the hole isn't perfectly centered. So to adjust for that, I'm going to mark the hole location on the groove. The center line of that hole is where we're going to route another Dovetail groove that will accept the hardware. For this one, the setup gauge is no help because we actually need to recess the Dovetail groove a little bit deeper than we normally would. So I line it up by eye using the laser line on the bit, making it even with the bottom of the groove. At the table saw, I'll plow out the bulk and then make the final pass at the router table. All the components for our top are done at this point, so let's see how it works. The stops slide nicely and tighten down securely, so I think we've got a winner. Before moving on, I'm going to apply some wiping poly to the mating surface of the jig. I really want to seal it up so that I can apply some wax and reduce friction as much as possible. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Next, we're going to make this vertical clamping plate here. The spacing of the grooves, that's really totally up to you, but I think what we have in the plan will satisfy most people's needs. I'll lay out the groove locations based on the plan and make sure that my center lines wrap around to the edges. From there, I can make the first cuts using the dado stack at the table saw. Because it's a symmetrical layout, I can make 4 cuts per setting, rotating the piece as I go. And of course only 2 cuts for the center. Now we can do that same cutting process, but at the router table, rotating as needed. Well, pardon me while I interrupt this groovy footage to let you know why I think MicroJig's new Ratchet Clamp AP is awesome. They engage with any MatchFit dovetail slot for holding pretty much anything, anywhere. The clamp also engages with a lot of standard T-tracks and regular dovetail slots, as well as being compatible with track systems as I showed earlier. The Ratchet Clamp AP also features an anti-pivot spring that keeps the arm up and prevents it from falling down. So now it's much easier to position the clamp and your workpiece as the head only moves when you want it to. The ratchet system gives you several stages of clamping force, and you'll hear the satisfying clicks as you tighten it up. The quick release trigger disengages the clamp, allowing you to quickly adjust its position and re-engage. Oops. Obviously, we're going to be using these clamps today in the context of this mortising jig, but they're also handy for use around the drill press, the MFT, and anywhere else you want to cut a dovetail slot for work holding. MicroJig also has an extensive library of free project plans that you might want to check out for inspiration. Find the plans and pick up your own set of MatchFit ratchet clamps at microjig.com. Unfortunately, the capacity of the fence won't allow me to make the centermost cut. So for that, I clamp on a tool guide front to back, and that's going to allow me to make use of the larger dimension of the table. The MicroJig bit does a really good job of not leaving a bunch of frayed material, but I want these slots to be as smooth as possible, so I'll hit the inside walls with some 180 grit sandpaper. Next up, we're going to make some fences. All we really need is a thin strip of plywood with a couple of slots cut for the hardware, and that's going to allow these pieces to move around as needed to just about any angle. You've seen the drop cut thing already, so this is no different. We just have to stop, skip a few inches, and then plunge again. And this time, I did the thing that I mentioned earlier, only going halfway on each face to make the through cut. The less we have of that bit sticking up, the better. Now you don't really have to do this part, but I thought that the fences might work a little bit better if they have slightly rounded profiles at the top. Totally optional. All right, let's test them out. The idea with these things is that they should be able to move to just about any angle and any position to help support our workpieces for repeatable cuts. So now we've got our top assembly and our front clamping plate. All we need now is a sturdy base. The base will have the bottom piece, 3 ribs, and our subtop. I'll assemble everything with glue and clamps, working with the front face down on the bench so that those pieces all stay in the same plane. With clamping pressure applied, I can make any changes I need to make sure that the components are nice and square. And the most important thing is that the front is square to the top. Now I can countersink and drive some screws at each joint. Next, we'll attach the clamping plate. I'll pop in a few brad nails to stop the piece from sliding around, but then secure everything with screws. I'll check it for square once again, but honestly, if it's not square at this point, you're in trouble. So make sure it's square before this stage. And let's get this thing together one final time. Of course, if you don't have an Oreo, you can skip this final step. What do you think? It's pretty nice, right? So now we're going to make some setup helpers. First, we need a piece of 5/8 stock that fits snugly into our slot. We'll cut one portion off and mark it with center lines, and that's going to help us when aligning our work pieces. The other pieces can be cut to very specific lengths as spacers that correspond to different length mortises. Now, to calculate the size of any of these spacers, we have to think about the bushing and its relationship to the bit that's in there, and that's going to change depending on which bit we use. What won't change is the size of the guide bushing. So let's imagine this is our 5/8 guide bushing, 5/8 of an inch, and this is from the outside edge to the outside edge, not the inner, outer. Now let's say we have our 3/8 router bit, okay? We know that is 3/8 of an inch. So what we need to account for is this space right here from the router bit to the edge of that 5/8 guide bushing. And in this case, it's going to be 1/8 on each side, right? For a total, if you take that gap in total, that's a 1/4 inch gap. So now the math becomes very easy. If we know we want a 2-inch mortise, what we need in terms of a spacer is a 2 1/4 inch spacer. Now using this bit, that needs an R. Any size mortise we want, we simply add a 1/4 inch to the spacer and that center line, and that will give us the perfect length mortise we're looking for. But we always have to use that 3/8 bit. Now what happens if we go, let's say with a 1/2 inch bit? With a 1/2 inch bit, our gap on this side is a 1/16, and our gap on this side is a 1/16, which is a total of an 1/8. So it's almost exactly the same thing we did before, but instead of adding a 1/4 inch, we only add an 1/8. So we want a 2-inch long mortise. We need a spacer that's 2 1/8 of an inch long. All right, it looks pretty good. Seems like it's going to work, but let's put it to the test by building a simple door frame. Okay, I said a door frame, but I'm going to be lazy and only do one joint with a rail connecting to a stile. I'll start by putting center lines on the end of my rail. In case you haven't noticed yet, everything with this jig relies on center lines. While we don't necessarily need center lines on the stile piece, they're nice to have just to confirm alignment until we gain some confidence in our new jig. On the jig itself, you'll want to take the center line of the guide bushing slot and transfer that to the inner wall. That just makes it easier to see when our workpiece is in the correct position. Now I can insert my centering block to set the front to back position of our jig top. When the pencil lines line up, we could lock down our top. To set my side to side stops, I use the spacer that we made previously that'll yield a 2-inch long mortise. I simply drop it in the slot, line up the center line with the center line on the workpiece, bring the 2 stops in and lock them down when they make contact. And now I just need to line up my rail piece and clamp it into place. I could then put the fence in position so that I can make the same mortise on any other workpieces that need it. With the guide bushing installed in my router, I'll insert the 3/8 inch bit and set the depth. Remember to account for the fact that the top of this thing is 3/4 of an inch thick. Just for a little extra security, I'll add another ratchet clamp. And now the easy part. I work my way down about a 1/4 inch at a time until the mortise is completely cut. Man, I really need to remember to put a hand on the workpiece when I disengage the clamps. Now, if we were doing a real door, we'd repeat that mortise on all of our rails before moving on to the stiles. For the stiles, the mortise will go on the edge of the board. Fortunately, we can still use the fence that we have in place as our stop. I just want to confirm that the center lines line up when we do that. Now I round the mortise, and Bob's your uncle. Look at that, a nice clean mortise. Now for the tenons, I just milled up some scrap to thickness that gives us a nice slip fit in the mortise, and the width of the piece should go from one end of the mortise to the other. I use a round over bit to round the ends, and then cut the stock to length. And just like that, we've got a perfect mortise and tenon joint, nice and level on the face, and even on the edge. So let's see what else we can do. How about a twin mortise and tenon joint? Now this one shouldn't be much different than what we've already done, since I'm making the spacing symmetrical. I cut the mortise on one side, rotate the workpiece, and then cut the second mortise. For the adjoining piece, we can cut one mortise with the current setup. And to cut the other mortise, we'll need to move the fence out of the way. You can see that to make these mortises systematically, you're going to need to strategize things like the fence position and your cut order. So now we can just drop in a couple of our tenons and boom, a sturdy joint if there ever was one. And look at that, nice and flush on the face and the ends. Okay, so what about odd-shaped pieces? Let's put a mortise in this giant dowel. And how about a mortise in some mitered pieces? Bottom line is, as long as you can draw center lines on it, you can put a mortise in it. There it is, a handy mortising jig for making incredibly strong classic mortise and tenon joints with the help of MicroJig's ingenious clamps and components.
When you're doing woodworking, it's really handy to be able to clamp things to the front of your bench. For years, I tried to find the best way to do it without taking apart my bench or buying a really expensive vise. And then I discovered the MicroJig MatchFit system. Now, this wound up being the best thing I've ever found and used. The first thing I did is I put a groove along the face of my bench top, and I was able to clamp things on like a vise and do different things like that. The second thing I did is I made this bench topper that had the grooves on it so I could clamp things in place and work on it that way. And then I had this great thought, what if I combine the two so I can have a taller and wider front surface for better clamping and a wider top portion with jigs using the MicroJig MatchFit hardware that I can set up and do different things with. So I've used those a lot and I love them, but now MicroJig has a whole CNC Workholding clamping kit that works both with this and on your CNC. It's got lots of different options and opportunities and ways of clamping things. It's really well designed. All this to say that the MicroJig clamping system has changed the way I do things in my shop. So I got this long board I want to cut, and I don't have a sled for my table saw, and I just decided to make one. I'm using the new MicroJig MatchFit Grid Router setup. Now, this thing is really cool. The first amazing idea is that it has a guide along the side that will ride in the rail. So it rides first along the edge and then in each rail, so you can just move your grids over, making 4-inch grids all the way around. The next thing that blew me away is how the base plate is set up to accept any size router up to 7 inches. You can see that it slides in and you can easily clamp your piece in there. Now, put the Dovetail bit in, set it up, and you just simply reverse how you did your grids. So the last relief cut is your first dovetail cut. Now you just keep going along there and you just ride the groove in and cut your new dovetails. And then when you're done, you're going to have this full dovetail setup with the MicroJig MatchFit system that you know I love and use all the time. So this was a really quick, easy way for me to make a table saw sled. You can use it to make a bench top, or you can do your whole bench top this way. It's nice and easy. I really dig it. I think they came up with another great winner. And now making my jigs just got easier. MicroJig just came out with this really neat CNC clamping kit that works great with my bench topper. It's got all sorts of tools and directions. I like this edge guide. It has a lip, so it'll always be straight, and it has a low profile. This is the U-clamp. It's really nice because it has different sizes, and it clamps down on the top and the outside, so you have consistent pressure. You can see it has a little U-clamp that fits into place. The ramp clamps are neat because as you tighten them down, they move forward on the ramp. And then these are the ring clamps. There's actually 2 pieces to them, and when you put it in place and twist it, it'll lock into place. So I put that board down, I'm using the ramp clamp to lock it, and now I'm going to use that ring clamp to tighten it up to the side, and it's really tight on there. I was very impressed. This is a nice setup for my bench topper or CNCs. I have some pieces of glue up, and I'm going to use 3 of my favorite things. One are these micro jig quick clamps that fit into the groove of my workbench on the front. That's my second favorite thing. And the third, of course, is Titebond glue. Now I'm going to use the regular glue and CA glue plus accelerator trick, and that's going to let me get this piece together quickly and get back to work. So obviously you saw me put the glue, the CA glue, I sprayed the accelerator on this piece, push it down for a few seconds, and you can see it's done already. Now look how quickly I could release it with the quick clamps too. They're awesome. One of my favorite things on my workbench are these MatchFit grooves that I put in there. They have so many different uses. In this case, I'm putting finger grooves in the end of a thick board. So you notice it's flush to the top of my workbench. I'm going to take my trim router. I've got a little bullnose bit in there. I'm going to route out a little bit. Now what I did is I set it up so that the guide there actually hits on the 2 different edges of my MatchFit clamps, and then I cleaned everything up with my DFM card scraper with the little roundover bit, and then a little bit of sandpaper, get the rest of the way in there, and it's all cleaned up, ready to go. I can take it off, and it's ready to go with those finger grooves. Nice and easy.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Microjig Shop. My name's Morgan, and today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the MatchFit system. We'll explore the theory behind it, how that plays into the design of each product, and hopefully that'll give you a better understanding of how the MatchFit system can help you work smarter in your workshop. MatchFit, what's that even mean? Great question. Thanks for asking. The MatchFit system is based around the proven reliability of the Dovetail profile. We've leveraged the versatility of the Dovetail profile not for joinery, but as a complete work-holding solution for your entire workshop. Dovetail clamps. Dovetail clamps were the first product in the MatchFit line. It was designed around a 1/2-inch 14-degree dovetail profile because it's steadily been the most common dovetail router bit on the market. The jaw of the clamp is forged to match this profile so that it can fit into the track created by this router bit. See what I did there? The dovetail profile makes it possible to clamp material where traditional clamps just can't go. By having the ability to create your own tracks on the fly, we've eliminated the need to buy and install expensive metal T-track. This allows you to add essential functionality to virtually any surface in your workshop. Why Dovetail? Thought you'd never ask. In addition to its popularity and availability, the physical attributes that make Dovetail joints strong and reliable also make it an ideal profile for tracks. If we used a T-slot profile, all the clamping pressure would be concentrated on these 2 small lips with the force pulling perpendicular to the surface. This lends itself to weakness as pressure is applied, especially if the T-slots are in plywood with the contact points located where 2 thin plies meet. The tapered walls of the MatchFit Dovetail track create a broader contact surface with the jaw of the clamp and distribute clamping pressure evenly and non-perpendicular to the surface of the material. This creates a stronger track for assembly and all kinds of work-holding solutions. Is a wood track strong enough? Won't the clamp just tear out? I actually get this question a lot. So when you're clamping material, force is applied concurrently, meaning as you tighten the clamp, the jaw is pulled up while an equal amount of pressure is applied downward. So the force isn't actually pulling, it's pinching. Now let's look at that in contrast with aluminum T-track. To install T-track, you still have to route out a channel so that it sits flush with the surface of the material. Standard T-track has a standard interior depth of 3/8 of an inch, leaving very little material to secure the track in place. That means you have to use very small screws. When pressure is applied anywhere but directly over the track would remain intact, however the small screws holding it in place could easily tear out. Not to mention, aluminum T-track on average costs about $7 a linear foot. So there's that. Can I do the same thing with dog holes? In some cases yes, in others no. For instance, let's say you want to secure material on a table saw sled or at a tall fence. You wouldn't be able to just stick any old F-style clamp in a dog hole without the jaw sticking out of the other side. Not only that, dog holes confine the clamp to a fixed location, which may not work for the workpiece you're trying to secure. Dovetail tracks allow the clamp to move anywhere along the track, remaining inside the material so no part of the clamp interferes with your work. Sure, dog holes do just fine holding things down on a workbench, but only with clamps. What about hardware? Only tracks give you the ability to use hardware to secure jigs anywhere on your work surface. Dovetail clamps have a throat depth of 2 3/8 of an inch and a clamping capacity of 5 3/8 of an inch, applying 595 pounds of clamping pressure with a removable machine screw that allows you to reverse the arm of the clamp. Dovetail hardware. MatchFit Dovetail hardware was created for use in jigs and fixtures and replaces traditional metal hardware for T-track. Hardware made for aluminum T-track comes in all shapes and sizes, which can be frustrating when you're trying to find the right hardware to match it. By standardizing our hardware with the same 1/2" 14-degree dovetail profile as our clamps, everything works together in one standard track. We currently offer 3 types of hardware: 1.5" long with wing knobs, 1" long with round knobs and nylon shoulder washers, and female with 1032 threaded inserts, screws, and washers. The 1.5" long hardware and wing knobs are ideal for jigs made out of thicker material. The wing knobs give you more torque for applications that call for a tighter hold. The 1" long hardware works really well in tighter spaces where you might not have enough clearance to turn a wing knob. The included shoulder washers are compatible with the accessory notches found throughout the Gripper line of products. The female track nuts allow you to use any length of 1032 screw to secure jigs and fixtures with a flat surface. One notable feature of the Dovetail hardware is this subtle ramp at the bottom. Sometimes when you're at a lot of tracks, the depth can be inconsistent. This becomes a problem where 2 tracks intersect. If the depth of the tracks don't match, you'll end up with steps that could bind up the hardware. The ramp lets hardware pass over those small steps with ease. When using Dovetail hardware in a grid of intersecting tracks, you can cut slots in your jig that allows you to rotate it 360 degrees. This isn't necessarily a new concept, but historically this would need to be done with intersecting T-track. Installing T-track intersections is tedious and expensive, whereas with the MatchFit system you can create your own grid of tracks with just a router bit. Dovetail router bit. The MatchFit system was designed around a standard 1/2" 14-degree dovetail profile. Although this bit from any manufacturer will work, we made some improvements to the profile and started making our own. One key feature of our Dovetail router bit is the built-in roundovers. We added a 1/16" radius to the top because a regular Dovetail bit, although perfect for joinery, wasn't ideal for creating clamp tracks. The tapered profile cuts to a sharp point, and even a brand new super sharp bit will leave behind fibers that need to be sanded off. So if you're routing a bunch of tracks, that'll eat up a lot of valuable shop time. Not only does it eliminate the need for sanding, it removes sharp edges that could potentially bind up material sliding across the top. You'll notice that the top radius doesn't completely round off. What this does is create a 30,000ths of an inch depth tolerance, so the narrowest part of the track will remain constant. Because it doesn't completely round off, you avoid creating a step where a normal radius would end. We call this flare edge technology. There's also a 1/32 inch roundover at the bottom to strengthen the track structurally by removing less material. Dado stop. The dado stop makes fast, incredibly accurate cross-cut dados with a standard saw blade without the need for a stacked dado set. The theory behind the dado stop is to set the width of the dado cut by registering off of the width of the material while simultaneously accounting for the exact curve of the blade. This eliminates the need to install a stacked dado set and experiment with a bunch of shims. Simply template the blade's kerf, either with a setup gauge or with a scrap piece of MDF. Once you have a template of your kerf, you set leg number 2. With leg number 2 set to account for the blade's kerf, leg number 3 is set to the width of the inlay material. Just use a setup gauge or a simple square. You'll notice a gap between the square and leg number 1. This is your kerf. When you cut one side of the dado, the blade will remove material equal to the width of that gap. Make your first cut by registering off leg number 1. Your second cut by registering off leg number 3. Then clear the waste out of the middle in a few passes. This is great for cutting lap joints or decorative inlays. The dado stop is also very helpful for calibrating your fence scale. The fixed leg number 1 is exactly 3 inches long. When clamped to the fence, you can touch leg number 1 to the blade and adjust your fence scale to read 3 inches. And as if that wasn't enough, you can also use the dado stop as a cross-cutting spacer. Since we know that the fixed leg of the dado stop is exactly 3 inches long, just add 3 inches to the measurement you want to cut when setting the fence. Setup gauge. The setup gauge was originally created as an accessory for the dado stop. It records a template of the blade's exact kerf, making the dado stop setup faster and more accurate. Because the setup gauge is molded out of plastic, it retains its shape despite seasonal temperature and humidity changes. When you cut it, the setup gauge becomes a permanent, precise template of the kerf cut by that specific blade on that specific saw. The dado stop is used with a miter gauge for cross-cut dados. However, by accounting for the blade kerf and registering off the actual inlay material, we recently discovered that it can be used to cut long dados with a RIP fence based on the same principle. Here's how you can cut long dados using the fence instead of short cross-cut dados with a miter gauge. Trim the kerf out of the left side of the setup gauge instead of the right side where it would normally be cut. Put a scrap piece of the inlay material against the fence crossbar with the trimmed section of the setup gauge touching the other side, and clamp the setup gauge to the fence rail. Cut the first shoulder of your dado. Move your fence so that it's touching the untrimmed portion of the setup gauge. Then cut the other shoulder, then trim out the middle in a few passes. Booyah! The setup gauge also features 2 notches to help cut dovetail tracks more quickly and accurately. This inner notch right here helps you quickly set your blade or router bit to a cutting depth of 11/32 of an inch. And this outer notch right here serves as a depth gauge for your dovetail router bit. The MatchFit dovetail router bit has a laser cut depth guide for setting cutting depth, but if you're using a dovetail bit from any other brand, this notch makes setting your cutting depth much faster and more accurate. 1/4 inch relief bit. The MatchFit 1/4 inch relief router bit is used to create a 1/4 inch wide, 11/32 of an inch deep relief groove prior to cutting dovetail tracks. Cutting a 1/4 inch wide relief groove at this depth removes 55% of the waste material, putting less stress on and extending the lifespan of your dovetail router bit. Unlike any other 1/4 inch diameter router bit, this one features a 1/32 inch roundover at the top of the profile. This roundover follows the profile of the MatchFit dovetail router bit, ensuring proportional material removal. It's also helpful for reducing fuzz and tear out at the top of the tracks when using a dovetail router bit from another manufacturer. However small it may seem, those fibers can create an uneven surface, resulting in a depth variance when cutting dovetail tracks. It also features a 3-degree up-shear carbide. When used in conjunction with the MatchFit dovetail router bit's down-shear carbide, the alternating cutting direction yields noticeably cleaner cuts. Now let's look at some use cases where the MatchFit system can improve your workflow on common day-to-day tasks. Use dovetail hardware to set up stops and clamps to secure material on sleds. Route a couple dovetail tracks and create a simple auxiliary drill press table. Use a spacer to secure material from a distance, leaving the top unobstructed for flattening, template routing, or CNC work. Use it on your miter saw bench to set up stops and secure material. You can use it to make a tall fence on your table saw. And of course, assembling your projects on a flat surface will give you better overall results every time. Well, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully this has given you a better understanding of what the MatchFit system is, how it works, and how it can help you work smarter in your workshop. Thanks for watching.